Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. A short pause in US arms deliveries to Ukraine resulted in a record-breaking Russian terror attacks against civilians. Will the US and the Europeans put more pressure on the Kremlin to stop the killing? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Will Russian attacks cause another wave of exodus from Ukraine? Polish extreme right politician to face consequences over Holocaust denial. And the Green Revolution is here. From May to June, the main source of electricity in Europe was solar power. After 2 consecutive nights of terror in Kyiv, Russia hit a maternity hospital in Kharkiv and targeted Odesa's residential area, wounding dozens of people. We're joined now by our correspondent in Ukraine, Oskar Teji. Good evening, Os. How do you expect the US to react to this relentless wave of attacks, given the fact that Special Envoy Keith Kellogg will visit the capital city on Monday? President Zelensky, on the other hand, confirms that the arms deliveries have already resumed.
Yes, so it's been another difficult 24-hour period for the Ukrainians, sustaining 9 deaths and 42 people injured in that wave of attacks, which, as you rightly said, targeted a maternity hospital in Kharkiv, reportedly injuring some pregnant women inside. Now, this news was reported to the US president on camera, and he had something interesting to say about his position. Let's take a listen to what he said following that news.
Russian drones hit a maternity hospital in Ukraine overnight.
I know. You'll be seeing things happen.
It's a rather cryptic statement there from the US President Donald Trump, but President Zelensky released a statement later on in the day saying, according to all reports, supplies have been restored. So the Ukrainians certainly feeling buoyed by the news that those weapons shipments are coming, and also reports that there's going to be further weapons shipments to Ukraine using the president's drawdown authority. Now, that has not been confirmed yet. That's still reported, but the statement released by Zelensky certainly makes it sound like he's had good news with regards to further air defense supplies and further weapon systems that the European partners may also be involved with supplying. So it's been a wild roller coaster ride for the Ukrainian government over the last couple of weeks with that announcement, as you said, to halt weapon supplies. And now that looks like not only have those weapon supplies been restored, but we're looking towards maybe potentially new weapon supplies being announced by the Trump administration. Keith Kellogg, the US Special Envoy to Ukraine and Russia, he's on his way to Ukraine, as you said, on Monday. He's spending a week here, going to have a week-long visit in Ukraine. And President Trump, even more cryptically, said there's going to be some announcement on Monday, potentially with regards to Russia. So a lot to happen next week. It's going to be another very busy diplomatic week for Kyiv. But they will be hoping that these positive signals that they've heard will result in new weapon supplies being delivered, vital supplies that they need, particularly Patriot systems that the US can help send to Ukraine to protect against those cruise missiles that have been doing so much damage and devastation to the Ukrainian cities in recent weeks and months. Back to you, Matthew.
That was Oskar Teji reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Oz, and stay safe. As Russia ramps up its nighttime drone attacks against Ukrainian cities, crowds attempt to buy train tickets to neighboring Poland, but the odds of getting a seat are against them. Only 1 in 10 people are able to leave the country by rail. Anastasia Yanchenko reports.
Each week, the number of drones launched by Russia breaks records. Compared to last year, the scale of attacks has grown drastically. In just the first 9 days of July, over 2,000 drones have already been launched at Ukraine. The intensity of drone attacks has increased 4 to 5 times compared to the same period in 2024.
План Росії залякати наше суспільство. Russia's plan is to terrorize our society. Clearly, people are not sleeping. When Russia strikes and the alarms continue for 7 or 10 hours, people go to shelters. Putin clearly wants to destabilize our population.
The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission says June 2025 was the deadliest month in 3 years for civilians, with more than 230 killed and over 1,300 injured. The growing fear is also leading to more people leaving the country, especially if the attacks are expected to continue at this scale.
I think it's very, very real. And some people are thinking about leaving. If these attacks continue, there is that sentiment. So I think a refugee wave might be real.
One of the main ways civilians are fleeing is by train. The Kyiv-Warsaw route has become one of the most in demand. Each time, more than 3,000 people are competing for just 300 seats.
It's really hard now. I started checking for tickets 20 days ago and tried many times. Sometimes I succeed only on the third try, sometimes not at all. Tickets sell out in a minute.
Catching a train out of the country is difficult, not only due to the war exodus, but also because it's vacation season, and for many Ukrainians, the train is the most convenient and accessible transport abroad.
I came to rest. Things there became impossible lately. We haven't really slept for the last months, spending nights in the shelters. Honestly, I still can't believe there are no sirens here. It's quiet. You can finally sleep.
I don't see a big migration wave. Those who wanted to leave already left. People are holding on. We're used to it now. That's where our lives are, even if they're far from peaceful.
Still, experts warn, if Ukraine doesn't receive more air defense support soon, the situation may push more civilians to leave.
If there are no countermeasures from countries like the US and new technologies to take down drones, this may lead to some more people leaving Ukraine.
In 2024, approximately 8.7 million border crossings were recorded between Ukraine and Poland, indicating significant movement of people, while about 1 million Ukrainian refugees have chosen Poland as their new permanent residence.
European leaders have left the Eternal City as the fourth Ukraine Recovery Conference wraps up in Rome. And with Russia's air assaults on the war-torn country ramping up, Kyiv will be hoping the promises stick, as at a time that Ukraine needs it the most. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Diamond, sums up the last 2 days in the Italian capital.
Ukraine appears to be walking away from Rome with a folder full of deals and the backing of Europe. These events tend to be a blitz of talks and diplomacy, and this was no different. We heard leaders voice their support from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who unveiled a multi-billion-dollar equity reconstruction fund, to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. In fact, Prime Minister Tusk met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss air defence systems and weapons production. Of course, this summit took place in the long shadow of Russia intensifying its air assaults on Ukraine and amid questions over the future of America's military support in the region.
I think that the record of now the 4 reconstruction conferences is not impressive. There's been a lot of talk about structures, about how once the war ends, we can put in resources. Yes, we should provide some resources now, but there's no reconstruction if Ukraine does not win this war. And by win the war, I mean emerge as a secure, stable, economically viable state, which would be, again, the secure piece that I referred to as opposed to the just piece. The way that happens is if all the countries assembled here provide the means to achieve that objective. Those means include, again, the weapons I've just discussed. It includes sanctions on Russia to batter the battered Russian economy. And it includes focus on getting economic resources into Ukraine right now.
Now, Poland is set to host next year's edition of the Ukraine Recovery Conference. And while these 2 days in the Eternal City will go down as a positive for Ukraine, well, the The real story will be in how the next few days, weeks and months play out. In Rome for TVP World, I'm Aaron Darman.
Up to 3 years in prison is the sentence Polish far-right MEP Grzegorz Braun might face for denying the existence of gas chambers in the Auschwitz-Birkenau Nazi German concentration and extermination camp. This is just the latest of his transgressions, but the list is much longer. Piotr Miszczuk has the story.
From putting out a Hanukkah menorah with a fire extinguisher to interrupting a minute of silence for Holocaust victims in the European Parliament, Grzegorz Braun has long held an anti-Semitic stance. Now, in an interview with public broadcaster Radio Wnet, he has shocked the world with a statement denying the existence of gas chambers in the complex of over 40 concentration and extermination camps operated by Nazi Germany in Poland-based Auschwitz.
Ritual murder is a fact, and let's say Auschwitz with its gas chambers is unfortunately a fake.
The far-right firebrand, who racked up 6.3% in the recent presidential election, then went on to disrupt a memorial service for the anti-Semitic Jedwabne pogrom, a massacre of Polish Jews in the town of Jedwabne perpetrated by ethnic Poles, a fact often denied by Polish nationalists. Braun's action sparked a reaction from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
We must do everything so that no one in the world associates Poland with such people, with such faces, with such actions. I also find it annoying sometimes that the prosecutor's office acts slowly or timidly, or the Marshal Guard or the police act with such caution because it's an MEP or an MP. I won't give an order to a policeman or a prosecutor at the scene of action, but my intention, my recommendation is to act firmly and decisively, with no regard for the position of those who break the law.
He also faced backlash from the hard-right opposition. Leader of the Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczyński, condemned the statement in a post on social media. Questioning the Holocaust and the events that took place at Auschwitz is not an acceptable practice. It is a lack of basic respect for the victims who lost their lives there, and it is also part of a policy of falsifying history. Grzegorz Braun's statements on this matter indicate that he is taking actions influenced by external factors, which have a significantly negative impact on the well-being of our nation. Braun, who openly considers himself one of the last defenders of Christianity in Europe, was also taken to task by the Catholic Church.
Anti-Semitism in any form is, according to church teaching, a sin and a moral evil. Denying the Holocaust is a lie and puts one on the side of the perpetrators, not the victims.
Now Braun will be subject to an investigation by the Polish Institute of National Remembrance for Holocaust denial, which in Poland is a crime persecuted by the state. It's likely this will lead to yet another motion to lift Braun's immunity.
The act is punishable by a fine or imprisonment of up to 3 years. If there are grounds to bring a charge, the prosecutor of the District Commission for the Prosecution of Crimes against the Polish nation will need to apply to the European Parliament for a waiver of immunity.
Amid the growing popularity of Grzegorz Braun and the rise of the far right in Poland and beyond, the words of the late Auschwitz survivor, Marian Turski, ring even more ominously. He urged people not to be impervious to bending historical truth or discriminating minorities.
Thou shalt not be indifferent, because if you are, you won't even notice when your heirs will suddenly see an Auschwitz falling down, dropping down from the skies straight on them.
Approximately 1,100,000 people were killed in the Auschwitz concentration and extermination camps. 1 million of them were Jews.
On Friday, Poland paid respects to the victims of the Wolynia massacre, the genocide of Poles conducted by Ukrainian nationalists during World War II. Kazimierz Łysiak reports on how the scars of the past and historical reconciliation shape present-day relations between the two countries.
With this salvo, Polish soldiers are honoring the memory of Poles who were murdered by Ukrainian nationalists in the Second World War in what came to be the Volhynia massacre. This issue has divided Poland and Ukraine for decades. Between 1943 and 1944, Ukrainian nationalists brutally murdered some 100,000 Poles in a series of gruesome organized attacks. The victims, buried in mass graves in what is now modern-day Ukraine, never received proper burial.
This brutal crime was one of the worst events in the history of Poland. This was one of the worst genocides of the 20th century and our recent memory.
And the importance of the proper burial is something which unites Poles across the political spectrum. This June, both the ruling coalition and the opposition all voted in favor of making July 11th the National Day of Remembrance of the Volhynia victims. And while Ukraine refused to agree to exhumations for years, it recently changed its stance after negotiations with the government of Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
We are finding a common language when it comes to the issue of the Volhynia massacre and those sensitive dramatic matters in our history. It has to be mutual. I will not allow the use of this difficult historical event for political games in Poland.
But the issue has turned political. Even though Kyiv has just agreed for a second exhumation site to be set up, Polish right-wing politicians don't think that's enough, including President-elect Karol Nawrocki.
I consistently demand a systemic resolution by the Ukrainian authorities regarding permits for the search and exhumation of victims of the Volhynia genocide. Reconciliation can only be based on the truth.
Nawrocki, an ally of the Law and Justice Party during the election campaign earlier this year, conditioned the potential ratification of Ukraine's NATO membership on the exhumations.
Today, I do not see Ukraine in any structure, neither in the European Union nor in NATO, until such important civilizational issues for Poles are resolved.
To then double down and say that he won't ratify the membership no matter what, in a nod to far-right voters just before the election. Tusk's government, on the other hand, has a different approach. Full support of Ukraine in its fight against Russia, while resolving the historical matters simultaneously.
Ukraine's victory is a matter of security for the whole of Europe. And victory means territorial integrity, sovereignty.
Will Poland and Ukraine ever be able to reconcile their difficult past? Only future can tell, but for now, here in Warsaw, Poles are bowing their heads in respect of the victims brutally murdered in the Second World War 82 years ago. From Warsaw, Kazimierz Łysiak, TVP World.
Thousands of people, including foreign officials, have gathered in the Bosnian town of Srebrenica to commemorate the victims of the biggest ethnic cleansing in Europe after World War II. Paweł Trzaskowski reports on the long shadow the massacre of Bosnian Muslim men and boys 30 years ago still casts over modern relations in the Balkans.
This Friday marks the 30th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide, tragic events from the war in Bosnia that this year gained additional international recognition.
This year we also had for the first time events in New York, in Geneva, in Brussels that really marked this on a much higher level. For years now we have systematic denial of the genocide in Srebrenica, both locally by Bosnian Serbs but also regionally by Serbia. That has grown in the last few years, where we have Hungarian officials, where we have Russian officials who are really becoming a part of this far-right coalition to deny the Srebrenica genocide. That makes this year's commemoration inside the New York UN headquarters, in Geneva, in the European Parliament, in the Council of Europe, that much more important.
Bosnia and Herzegovina comprises of three ethno-national groups: Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats and Bosnian Muslims, or Bosniaks. And it was here in Srebrenica, the UN-designated safe area, where Bosnian Serbs executed more than 8,000 Muslim boys and men.
These are the days when, naturally, with deep sorrow, reflection and reverence, we remember the victims.
One of the men to speak out about the atrocities of war in Bosnia was Tadeusz Mazowiecki. Polish Prime Minister in a post-communist Poland who later became UN Special Envoy to Bosnia, but he gave up the post having witnessed the atrocities and lack of action of international community in Bosnia. This protest paved the way to international recognition of Srebrenica as genocide.
In this moment of remembrance, we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to accountability and truth. There is no room in Europe or anywhere else for genocide denial, revisionism, or the glorification of those responsible. Denying such horrors only poisons our future. It is our duty to confront and acknowledge the full truth. This is the first step in ensuring that such atrocities never happen again.
Bosnian Serbs still do not recognize Srebrenica as genocide, a major bone of contention in a country that is still healing 30 years on from its war wounds. From Srebrenica for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
Solar panels have changed Europe's energy landscape for good. In the last 2 months, they were responsible for producing 22% of the EU's electricity. Jan Kennedy reports on the renewable energy sector.
This past June was among the hottest on record, with temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius across Western Europe. But while people sought relief from the scorching heat, solar panels were soaking up the sun, becoming the EU's biggest source of power for the first time ever. Solar power soared above 22% of the EU's electricity generation, overtaking nuclear, the usual #1 source of supply. This shift came amid reduced nuclear output, largely due to ongoing maintenance and renovation works in France, home to the EU's largest nuclear fleet. And with renewable energy usually cheaper to produce, the choice was obvious.
Basically, it's a mix of technical limitations, delayed capacity, and the growing impact of renewables on the grid. There were moments, especially during sunny afternoons, when electricity prices dropped basically very low or even turned negative, which is an issue as well. So in those moments, nuclear plants, which are less flexible, sometimes had to scale back their output.
After a sluggish start to the year, wind energy production rebounded in May and June, setting new records and covering around 16% of the EU's electricity demand. Meanwhile, coal-fired power, the dirtiest source, dropped to just 6%. In recent years, Poland has made substantial progress in decarbonising its energy mix and for the first time last month generated more power from renewables than coal. Analysts, however, stress the importance of a stable power supply.
Building nuclear power plants, and they expanded the fossil gas so it can be used as a base load. So, for example, during the cloud days when solar capacity is not enough. So basically you can use gas and nuclear. And the second thing is invest into grids battery, which basically can help to have stable base load, because solar and wind in terms of power generation is not the most stable.
And that's already happening. The Polish transmission system operator, PSE, has announced a €15 billion investment programme through 2034 to support the growing share of renewables in the grid.
And we're back to our main story of the day. Ukraine will receive more US-made Patriot missiles to defend against Russian drone attacks. Well, Special Envoy Keith Kellogg is travelling to Kyiv on Monday. And to talk about it, we are joined by Yevgenia Kravchuk, Ukrainian MP and Deputy Chair of the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy in Ukraine. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. Donald Trump said a major statement on Russia will be delivered on Monday, most probably. Now, what do you think it will be, and what would you like it to be?
Well, of course, the renewal of the U.S. aid is extremely important, both in the military packages, all the intelligence we receive, and also the commitment that we hear from United States, because still it's the biggest military partner for Ukraine, for Europe, at least in the terms of NATO cooperation. And we do welcome Keith Kellogg, the special envoy of President Trump, in Kyiv and in Ukraine, not only in Kyiv, and probably he will stay more than 1 day. So what we need now, besides the aid packages, is of course the tougher sanctions on Russian Federation. And if you look at the state of the economy of Russian Federation, you can clearly see that sanctions do work. And it looks like that the holder of Kremlin, Putin, did irritate Trump, not just with his ignorance and his arrogance in the when they spoke, but also with
and we're back on.
We had
yes. Well,
drones.
Now we know but President Zelensky stated that Keith Kellogg is a huge supporter of this bipartisan 500% tariffs bill. Now, do you expect this will be announced this Monday?
Well, it's the Senate's work. So basically, we do have the signatures of more than 80 senators from both parties, Republicans and Democrats. And I remind you that the total number of senators are 100. So it's the huge support for this bill. Of course, it's something that gives the leverage to President Trump in his conversation and his pressure on Moscow. But also it gives some reassurance to the European Union. And we do hope that EU will pass the 18th package of sanctions, despite that I think Slovakia this time is blocking it.
Right, so let me quote President Trump. We are going to be sending Patriots to NATO, and then NATO will distribute that. Now, do you think it will secure future arms shipments now that the weapons are to be paid fully for by NATO?
Well, you remember that a few weeks ago there was a NATO summit in The Hague. And there was a historical decision taken by the countries who are members of NATO to secure 5% of GDP on the expenses on defense. It's extremely important that any aid to Ukraine will be counted in this 5%, because actually Ukraine is the shield for European countries right now. I mean, you can sleep peacefully in Poland because there is a neighbor, Ukraine, who is intercepting all the Shaheds and keeping out all of this, million army of Russians not crossing and not going further. So having strong Ukraine is essential for any of the countries who are members of NATO, especially if they are situated on the European continent. So, basically, I think it's also we will see the further development of military cooperation and defense tech together with Ukrainian companies. Ukraine right now is the biggest producer of drones in the world, and we can produce more, and we can test them on the battlefield right away.
Well, the other side is not sleeping either, unfortunately. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov is traveling to North Korea this weekend. Now, how problematic is this close cooperation between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, given the fact that North Koreans are to deploy some 30,000 additional troops in Ukraine? And there was a report recently that showed that some 40% of all the Russian ammunition fired in Ukraine comes from North Korea.
That's actually the numbers that the chief of our military intelligence, Mr. Budano, stated in the interview to Bloomberg about the 40%. Well, I tend to believe this number, but it also shows that the military capacities of Russian Federation is not that great as they picture. So they need to have the support of North Korea. And it's also the ballistics, but also the troops and, the missiles. But at the same time, Russia is sharing the technologies that they own with North Korea. So making this axis of evil, mutually stronger. So that's something that nations and countries on the other side of the world in the Indo-Pacific should worry, because that's strategic cooperation between basically two aggressors that do not bind into the international laws. So I think extremely important to stop any of the shipments and any of the avoidment of the sanctions on the Western technologies that still could be found in Russian missiles.
Easier said than done, unfortunately. Yevgenia Kravchuk, Ukrainian MP, servant of the People Party, deputy chair at the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.